I've spent the last month knee-deep in official USDA data, scouring global agricultural forecasts, and talking to real farmers and industry insiders who see a storm coming straight for our shopping carts. In this script, I'm going to expose 30 specific grocery items that are on the brink of jaw-dropping price hikes, or are already skyrocketing as you read this. You'll hear the latest news, expert opinions, and even a few stories from regular folks who are feeling the pinch and bracing for what's ahead. And don't worry, I'm not just here to scare you into a panic-buying frenzy. I'll also give you practical tips on how to stockpile these essentials without going broke or letting them go bad. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why "shop smarter, not harder" might be your new mantra for 2025. So, grab a notepad or open your notes app, because you'll want to list these 30 grocery products to secure before the next wave of price shocks hits. Let's dive into it. Number 30. Olive oil. Let's start with the liquid gold of the kitchen, olive oil. You've likely seen headlines or social media posts talking about extreme heat waves decimating olive groves in southern Europe. According to the latest data from Spain's agriculture ministry, olive oil production is down by nearly 50% compared to typical harvests. An Italian Farmers Association reported Italy lost about 20% of its yield as well, while Greece has been slammed with erratic weather patterns. Together, these three powerhouses account for most of the world's premium olive oil. The result? A shocking 130% price increase from early 2024 to now, with forecasts predicting even further hikes by the first quarter of 2025. Experts like Matteo Bianchi, an agronomist specializing in Mediterranean crops, say these conditions aren't just a fluke. Climate changes are stressing the ancient olive trees, and certain varieties simply aren't adapting fast enough. To compound the problem, shipping costs have exploded. One importer in New York told me their cargo costs have tripled since 2023. Buy in bulk if you see any decent deal. Olive oil, stored properly in a cool, dark place, can last up to 2 years. Look for larger tins rather than individual bottles. It might feel pricey up front, but you'll be kicking yourself if you wait until the price is $40 a bottle. Trust me, at the rate we're going, that day isn't far off. Number 29, coffee. If you're a coffee lover, brace yourself. This wake-up call might hit harder than your strongest espresso. The International Coffee Organization, ICO, has released projections showing coffee bean prices could jump between 150% to 200% by mid-2025. Brazil and Colombia, major coffee suppliers, have been hammered by erratic rainfall and some of their worst droughts in decades. Farmers in Minas Gerais, Brazil's top coffee-producing region, say the rainfall shortage has cut yields by about 25% on average. Meanwhile, worldwide coffee demand has surged 35% since 2021, with millions of new coffee drinkers emerging in markets like China and India. It's a perfect supply and demand disaster. When you add rising fuel costs and supply chain disruptions, it's clear your local cafe's price hikes are just the tip of the iceberg. Whole beans stay fresher longer. Some experts say properly stored beans can keep their quality for up to 2 years. Consider vacuum sealing them or storing them in airtight containers in the freezer. If you're a true coffee devotee, buying in bulk right now might save you a small fortune in the months ahead. Number 28. Chocolate. We've all heard rumors about chocolate eventually becoming a luxury item, and guess what? That future is arriving a lot sooner than anyone hoped. Ghana and Ivory Coast, the West African nations that produce over 70% of the world's cocoa, have been dealing with extreme weather swings and a nasty disease called cocoa swollen shoot. Some farming communities lost 30% of their cocoa trees last year alone. Combined with labor shortages, young people are leaving farms in search of better wages, and rising transportation costs, major chocolate makers like Mars, Hershey's, and Lindt are predicting a 20 to 30% price jump by next year. Already, premium dark chocolate bars have climbed from around $4 to $6 or $7 in many grocery stores. Industry insiders warn that could go as high as 10 or 12 for artisanal brands. Surveys by the National Confectioners Association show consumers are shifting to smaller portion sizes or skipping chocolate altogether due to sticker shock. Chocolate, especially dark varieties with higher cocoa content, can be stored in a cool, dry place, ideally around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, for up to a year or more. Sealed properly, it'll be just fine. If you can't live without your daily chocolate fix, consider buying a case now before the next price surge hits. Number 27. Eggs. Eggs have already given us a preview of inflation chaos, with prices that practically doubled in early 2024. Yet experts warn we're nowhere near stabilized. Outbreaks of avian influenza have forced mass cullings. For example, Pennsylvania lost 1.3 million egg-laying hens in a single outbreak earlier this year. Feed costs, which represent a huge chunk of production expenses, are up a staggering 40% from 2023, and might climb even higher given rising corn and soybean prices. Throw in new cage-free regulations pushing up operational costs by millions for large-scale producers, plus increased cardboard and transportation expenses, and you have a perfect recipe for $7 or even $8 cartons of eggs in 2025. Believe it or not, you can freeze eggs. Crack them into containers or ice cube trays, add a pinch of salt to preserve texture, and freeze. They keep for up to a year. Liquid egg whites and other egg products can also be a budget-friendly alternative during times of volatility. Number 26. Salmon and other premium fish. Wild-caught salmon is at the top of every health enthusiast's shopping list, and now it's also on the top of the prepare for a price hike list. Marine biologists report a record drop in salmon populations off the Pacific coast, with some fish migrating hundreds of miles north just to find colder waters. Fishermen who used to reliably fill their boats in a few days say they're out at sea for a week or more, burning expensive fuel and returning with smaller catches. Meanwhile, farmed salmon producers aren't faring much better. Rising water temperatures are spurring disease outbreaks that kill thousands of fish, and the specialized feed they rely on is up around 45% in cost. A single pound of salmon that sold for $12 or $13 in 2023 might easily hit $20 or $25 by late 2025 if these trends continue. Look for sales on frozen salmon. Flash freezing technology means you're often getting a product that's just as fresh, sometimes fresher. Properly stored in the freezer, salmon will keep its quality for about 6 months. Number 25. Avocados. The beloved star of brunch culture is on thin ice. Avocado prices started to spike in late 2023, and it's not slowing down. Mexico's main avocado-growing state, Michoacán, has been dealing with persistent droughts and rising production costs. According to data from the Mexican government, water access has become a significant challenge, with wells needing to be drilled twice as deep compared to a decade ago. Transportation costs are also surging. Refrigerated trucking from central Mexico to U.S. distribution centers rose by 35% in 2024 alone. Complications at the border add hours, sometimes days to the journey, raising spoilage risk and overhead. Agricultural economists predict avocados could see a 45% price jump by next year, making that $2 fruit closer to $3 or $4 apiece. You can buy avocados slightly underripe and store them in the fridge once they're at the perfect stage of ripeness. Or if you're a guacamole fiend, consider mashing and freezing them with a little lime juice to use later. It won't taste exactly the same as fresh, but it'll save you some serious cash when prices spike. Number 24. Cheese, especially artisanal and aged. From Parmesan to Brie, cheese is about to become a serious wallet buster. Dairy feed costs have soared, energy prices for climate-controlled aging rooms have doubled, and European cheese producers are grappling with extreme heat that reduces milk yields by up to 30%. In Italy, they're calling it a cheese crisis. Some smaller Parmesan producers in the Emilia-Romagna region have had to slash production by 40%. The French brie industry is seeing the same problem: less milk, higher costs, and no immediate relief in sight. Market analysts suggest that by 2025, premium-aged cheeses could jump from $20 a pound to $35 or $40. Even more mainstream options like cheddar and mozzarella won't be immune, with predicted price hikes of 15 to 25%. Hard cheeses can actually be frozen if you plan to use them for cooking or shredding later. Cheesemongers recommend sealing them tightly to avoid freezer burn. Also, some specialty shops offer cheese clubs or futures contracts, letting you pay today's prices for cheese you'll pick up over the next several months. Number 23. Pasta. Pasta has always been a budget staple, but that's changing. Wheat prices on the global market are facing the fallout from extreme weather in North America and Europe. The USDA's Economic Research Service says drought conditions in key wheat-growing states cut yields by 20% last season, and farmers in Kansas and Oklahoma are planting fewer acres of wheat due to rising water costs. Meanwhile, ongoing tensions in Eastern Europe have disrupted global grain exports. All of this funnels into the cost of pasta. In 2024, we already saw a noticeable bump, with store-brand pasta packs going from about $1 to around 1.50 or 1.60. By 2025, some forecasters believe pasta prices could climb another 30 to 40%. High-end brands that import specialized durum wheat from overseas might double in cost. Dry pasta is practically immortal if you store it in a cool, dry place. Keep an eye out for bulk deals. One frequent shopper I spoke to, Janice from Chicago, said she started dedicating a whole pantry shelf to her favorite shapes. Between my kids and my meal prep routine, I go through it fast, so it only makes sense to buy ahead, she told me. Number 22. Rice. Rice isn't just a staple for Asian cuisines. Millions of Americans rely on it too, and it's under threat. India, the world's largest rice exporter, has been toying with export restrictions to keep domestic prices down. Meanwhile, drought conditions across parts of Southeast Asia have lowered yields. Thailand reported a 15% decrease in exports due to water shortages affecting their second growing season. As global supplies tighten, the cost of rice has already risen about 25% since last year. USDA projections hint we could see an additional 20% climb by mid-2025. This might not sound earth-shattering, but if you rely on rice as a budget-friendly filler, this adds up quickly, especially for families buying big bags each month. White rice can last up to 30 years if stored properly in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Brown rice has a shorter shelf life because of its higher oil content, but vacuum sealing can extend its viability. Considering how cheap it is today compared to future prices, it's a no-brainer to stock up if you eat it regularly. Number 21. Canned beans. Beans have been the go-to protein for those trying to avoid higher-priced meats, but that demand surge has ironically caused bean prices to creep up. Pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, you name it, have seen about a 12% jump so far in 2024. That might not sound huge, but experts warn it's just the beginning. Extreme weather events in the U.S. Southwest and Mexico have reduced bean yields, and supply chain hiccups make trucking cans around the country more expensive. A manager at a major Texas cannery said they're paying 30% more for aluminum cans than 2 years ago. That cost filters straight down to you. Canned beans can last 5 years past their printed expiration date if stored in a cool, dry area. Alternatively, you can buy dried beans in bulk, which store much longer, and cook them in batches to freeze for later. The dried version is cheaper long-term, but remember to account for the time and fuel to cook them. Number 20. Canned tuna. Canned tuna has been a pantry staple for generations, a convenient source of protein that's usually easy on the wallet. But as with salmon and other fish, the tuna industry is grappling with warming oceans and stricter catch limits meant to prevent overfishing. Major fishing companies out of Japan and the Philippines are noticing smaller tuna sizes and reduced schools, forcing them to journey deeper into the Pacific. Also, the cost of tin-plated steel for cans has soared, thanks to supply chain disruptions and a global steel shortage. Don't be shocked if a 5-ounce can of tuna that used to sell for $1 creeps up to 1.50 or 1.75 by the end of 2025. Most canned tuna remains good for 2-3 years, or even longer, past the printed date. Watch for store deals or warehouse club specials and load up a bit. Just keep an eye on any signs of can damage or swelling. Number 19. Peanut butter. Peanut butter is simple, tasty, and stable. A survivalist's dream. But the peanut crop isn't immune to harsh weather either. The southeastern United States, especially Georgia, churns out the majority of our peanut supply. Georgia's been dealing with both unexpected frost and summer droughts, harming yields. Meanwhile, shipping those peanuts to processing plants costs more in diesel every month. A big manufacturer recently announced they'd be bumping peanut butter prices by 10% this fall. Industry analysts suspect it could push up another 10 to 15% by next year. It's still cheaper than many proteins, but if you're stocking for the long haul, don't ignore these creeping costs. Unopened peanut butter can last up to a year or slightly more on the shelf. Natural peanut butter might separate over time. Just stir it well and you're good to go. Keep it in a cool place to extend its life. If you're a peanut butter fanatic, doubling up might be wise. Number 18. Whole wheat flour. Flour is another staple that's headed up in price due to the same wheat market disruptions affecting pasta. Whole wheat flour is especially sensitive to storage conditions because its higher oil content means it can go rancid faster than white flour. Expect a 25 to 30% hike in 2025 thanks to tight global wheat supplies and rising milling costs. For long-term storage, many bakers prefer all-purpose or bread flour since it has a longer shelf life. Still, you can freeze whole wheat flour in airtight containers, extending its freshness by several months or more. Just remember to let it come to room temperature before you bake with it. Number 17. Sugar. Sugar might seem like a cheap commodity, but disruptions in major sugar-producing countries like Brazil and India are pushing up global prices. Brazil's sugar crop was hit by the same drought affecting coffee, and India has imposed export limits in some regions to keep domestic prices stable. Futures markets are reflecting a potential 20% or higher increase in sugar costs by 2025. While refined sugar remains relatively cheap, those increases add up if you do a lot of baking, or if you're preparing big stores for emergency use. Candy and processed foods will likely get pricier as well, so the trickle-down effect is real. White granulated sugar lasts virtually forever if kept dry and away from pests. Store it in food-grade buckets or sealed containers. For large stockpiles, consider dividing it into smaller sealed packages, so you don't expose the entire stash to moisture each time you open it. Number 16. Salt. Salt is another forever item that rarely spoils, but even salt prices have edged up. Logistics, like trucking costs and rising packaging expenses, play a bigger role here than the raw material itself because salt is relatively abundant. Still, if you use specific gourmet salts from overseas, watch out. Shipping rates are soaring, and some Himalayan or Mediterranean salts have already jumped 15 to 20%. Store salt in airtight containers. It can absorb moisture from the air, which causes clumping, but it won't truly go bad. A big stock of salt is also great for preserving foods if fresh items get too expensive. Number 15. Oats. Oats are a fantastic budget breakfast or baking ingredient, but Canada, the world's largest oat exporter, experienced significant drought conditions that trimmed yields. The USDA projects a continuing slump in production if weather patterns don't stabilize. Oats may not see as wild a jump as coffee or olive oil, but 15 to 25% by 2025 isn't out of the question. Rolled oats or steel-cut oats store well in sealed containers for up to 2 years or more. Many folks vacuum seal them for even longer shelf life. If you're an oatmeal devotee or love baking with oats, it's worth stocking up during sales. Number 14. Powdered milk. Powdered milk is an absolute lifesaver if fresh milk becomes pricey or scarce. Dairy disruptions worldwide, from scorching summers to high feed costs, are pushing up the price of milk products across the board. According to a 2024 dairy market report, powdered milk prices have increased 28% since 2022, and some analysts expect another bump of 15% or more by next year. Powdered milk can last 1-2 years in original packaging and even longer in sealed mylar bags with oxygen absorbers. Keep it cool and dry, and you'll have a convenient source of calcium and protein on hand without relying on fresh milk's short shelf life. Number 13. Lentils. Lentils are a nutrition powerhouse. They're full of protein, fiber, and vitamins, making them popular among vegetarians and budget-conscious families alike. But here's the catch. Canada, the world's largest lentil exporter, suffered from the same drought that affected oats. Farmers have reported up to a 30% reduction in yields for certain varieties. Prices for bulk lentils in major U.S. retailers jumped about 10% in 2024. While that might not sound apocalyptic, some commodity traders see bigger hikes looming, particularly if global demand for plant-based proteins keeps climbing. If you've made lentils a part of your routine to cut back on meat costs, heads up. Dried lentils store 2-3 years in airtight containers, sometimes longer if sealed well. They're versatile, quick to cook, and freeze beautifully after preparation. If you find a good deal, consider grabbing an extra bag. Number 12. Dried fruit. Dried fruits, apricots, raisins, dates, are nutritional lifesavers in an emergency and tasty snack options even when times are good. But fruit growers in California's Central Valley have faced water shortages, driving up the cost to maintain vineyards and orchards for dried fruit production. That's on top of labor cost increases for harvesting and processing. According to a California Dried Fruit Association report, we might see dried fruit prices creep up by 20 to 25% over the next year. Europe's climate woes aren't helping, especially for items like dried figs and dates imported from the Mediterranean region. Properly stored dried fruit can last up to a year in cool, dry conditions and even longer in sealed or vacuum-packed containers. Keep an eye on discount racks. Sometimes stores mark down dried fruit near the best buy date, but it's still perfectly fine. Number 11, bottled water. Bottled water might seem like a strange thing to panic about, but extreme weather across the globe plus increased demand for emergency preparedness have turned water into a pricier commodity. The cost of plastic resin for bottles and rising transportation expenses have jacked up bottled water prices by about 10% in 2024. A manager at a major bottling plant stated that, with shipping costs nearly doubling since 2023, retailers are reluctantly passing on those expenses. While tap water remains far cheaper, if you're someone who relies on bottled water for convenience or safety, consider stocking a bit extra now. If you have the space, it's cheaper to buy large jugs than individual bottles. You can also invest in high-quality water filtration devices. Some families are skipping the bottled water route entirely and focusing on portable filters for emergency scenarios. Number 10. Vinegar. Vinegar might not be top of mind when you think inflation, but it's an essential for preserving, cooking, and even cleaning. Apple cider vinegar relies on apple crops. Wine vinegar depends on grape harvests. Both apples and grapes have faced climate-related challenges. California's vineyards, for instance, have been hammered by shifting weather, and orchard owners in the northeastern U.S. reported unusual frosts in late 2024. A representative from a vinegar bottling company said glass and plastic bottle costs are up 25%, making it tougher to keep vinegar cheap. Expect a modest but noticeable price climb, maybe 15 to 20%, by 2025. Vinegar can last essentially forever if sealed properly. If you use it for pickling or preserving, consider grabbing a few extra gallons. Number 9. Honey. Bees are under siege from habitat loss, pesticides, and climate change. Reports from beekeepers across the country show hive losses ranging from 30% to 45% in recent seasons. Fewer bees mean lower honey production, and with honey enjoying renewed popularity due to its perceived health benefits, demand is outrunning supply. Prices for raw local honey in some markets have doubled since 2022. Even commercial honey brands have nudged up their prices by about 15%. Many beekeepers predict that 2025 could bring another wave of price increases, especially if the next winter is harsh on hives. Honey never truly spoils. It can crystallize, but warm water or gentle heat brings it back to liquid form. Storing it in airtight containers in a dark place helps maintain flavor. If you see a sale, load up. Number 8. Canned tomatoes. Tomatoes are vulnerable to all kinds of weather extremes. Drought kills them off. Heavy rains can cause rot or fungal outbreaks. California's tomato belt has had to adapt to scorching heat and water restrictions, with farmers letting fields go fallow. Some farmland got hammered by unseasonal storms in 2024, flooding fields and ruining the crop. Canned tomato products, diced tomatoes, tomato sauce, paste are staples for countless recipes, so any shortage hits the market hard. A major processor in California mentioned that contract prices for tomatoes are up 16% from last year, and we could see further increases if next season is as erratic. Canned tomatoes can last 2-3 years. Store them in a cool spot and check for any rust or dents in the cans. If your favorite brand is on sale, consider grabbing a few extra to last you through the year. Number 7. Spices. Climate patterns are wreaking havoc in regions famous for spice production. Vanilla from Madagascar, black pepper from Vietnam, cinnamon from Sri Lanka. Each has faced a unique set of challenges, from hurricanes to droughts to political instability. Even the United States hasn't been immune. Chili pepper growers in the Southwest have contended with scorching heat and limited water. Some premium spices have doubled in cost over the past 5 years, and 2025 is shaping up to continue this upward trend. Importers also note that shipping smaller spice quantities can be trickier under new freight rules, adding more logistical hurdles. Dried spices remain potent for about 1-3 years, although they lose potency gradually. If you use a spice regularly, buy larger containers. Keep them in airtight jars away from direct light or heat. Consider learning to grind whole spices. They're often cheaper and last longer in their unground form. Number 6. Cooking oil alternatives. Canola, sunflower, etc. Olive oil isn't the only cooking oil in trouble. Canola and sunflower oil prices have spiked due to poor harvests in Canada and parts of Eastern Europe. Some fields were either too wet or too dry, and war-related disruptions in Ukraine, one of the largest sunflower oil exporters, have drastically reduced global supplies. According to the USDA, we could see canola oil jump another 25% by 2025, and sunflower oil remains volatile given the geopolitical situation. Just like olive oil, these oils can be stored for 1-2 years if kept in a cool, dark place. Watch for sales, especially at warehouse clubs, and consider splitting bulk purchases with friends if you won't use it quickly on your own. Number 5. Baking supplies. Yeast, baking soda, baking powder. If you love to bake bread or whip up cookies on weekends, keep an eye on these items. Yeast production relies on fermentation processes that are energy-intensive. With gas and electricity costs shooting up, companies are quietly upping their prices. Baking soda and baking powder also involve production and packaging issues, albeit less complex. But everything from raw materials to packaging is more expensive these days. While you won't see a triple-digit percentage increase, a steady 10 to 15% climb on these basics adds up, especially if you bake frequently. And if more people return to home baking to save money, demand might outstrip supply, leading to potential shortages like we saw in 2020. Yeast can be stored in the freezer for up to 2 years, maintaining high activity. Baking soda and baking powder also last a long time if they stay dry. Keep them sealed in their original packaging or transfer them into airtight containers. Number 4. Frozen vegetables. Frozen vegetables are usually a budget-friendly lifesaver, but they're not immune to cost increases. Rising energy prices have hit cold storage facilities hard. Refrigeration is one of the largest expenses in that line of business. Add in the fact that the produce itself might be more expensive to grow, drought, labor costs, etc., and you'll start seeing incremental price hikes in the freezer aisle. Some popular frozen veggies like broccoli florets, spinach, and mixed blends are already up 8 to 10% from early 2024. While that might not break the bank, if you're noticing your overall grocery bill balloon, every little bit matters. Most frozen vegetables can last about 8-12 months if you keep them at a consistent freezing temperature. Watch for store promotions or coupons and fill up your freezer. Number 3. Pet food. Your furry friends aren't safe from this inflation crisis either. Pet food makers rely on grains, meats, and a variety of other ingredients now becoming pricier. Some large pet food brands have quietly raised prices by 15% since 2023. Specialized diets or premium brands might see even bigger hikes if they use exotic proteins or high-cost ingredients. A representative from a major pet food manufacturer told me that supply chain disruptions on vitamin and mineral mixes are a major headache, and those costs are climbing faster than they can handle. The bottom line? Fido's kibble might get a lot more expensive next year. Dry pet food usually lasts 6-12 months unopened. Keep it in a cool, dark, and dry area, sealed to prevent moisture and bugs. If your pet's diet is stable, you might benefit from buying bigger bags or cases when you see a discount. Number 2. Baby formula and baby food. If there's one item that can't be compromised, it's baby formula. We've already seen supply shocks and recalls cause frantic shortages. Rising dairy and ingredient costs, plus strict regulatory hurdles, make formula one of the most volatile grocery items. Baby food, fruit and veggie purees, faces similar cost pressures from produce shortages. Parents I've talked to say they've witnessed formula prices creep up by 25% in the last 2 years, and it's likely to climb more. A father in Texas told me he's now driving an hour to a discount store that sells formula in bulk just to save a few dollars. Check expiration dates carefully. Most formulas have a 1-2 year shelf life unopened. Don't hoard formula to the point where it goes bad. but having an extra month's supply is a good safety net, especially with all the recalls and supply hiccups. Number 1, crackers and shelf-stable snacks. Finally, let's talk about crackers, chips, and other long-lasting snack foods. Wheat prices, corn prices, packaging, shipping, everything that affects these items is trending in the wrong direction. Some major snack producers have reported double-digit cost increases. Look at the label of your favorite cracker. It's basically flour, oil, salt, and we've already covered how each of those is set to rise. While these snacks might not be essential in the strictest sense, they're comfort items and quick meal accompaniments. They also last a long time on the shelf. Expect at least a 10 to 15% jump for many big brand crackers and snack products by next year. Crackers can last 6-9 months unopened, sometimes longer if well sealed. If they're for emergency or rotating pantry stock, watch for sales and keep them in a dry, cool place. For chips or other snacks, be mindful of the oils used. They can go rancid over time, so don't hoard too far beyond the best-by date. The truth is, these 30 grocery items are just the front line of a broader assault on our wallets. Supply chain tangles, extreme weather, rising labor costs, and global economic volatility are funneling into the food market. And while this might feel like a repeat of the pandemic-era shortages and price spikes, experts say what's brewing for 2025 could be even more severe, especially for items sensitive to climate and geopolitics. But knowledge is power. Knowing which items are at risk helps you prepare, buy ahead when prices are reasonable, and avoid panic purchases that drain your bank account. Maybe you won't be able to keep everything from skyrocketing in cost, but the difference between an informed consumer and an uninformed one can be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year.